Serious, what's the creepiest, scariest thing you've seen but no one believes you? I used to have a buddy that lived in the same neighborhood, a few streets over. One night we were having a couple of beers in his backyard while playing cards. I had some things to do the next morning, so just before 10 I said my goodbyes and shoved off. It was a short walk, maybe 15 minutes door to door, so I never drove. Anyway, it was a nice night, uneventful trip. But when I got home, my roommate was coming out the front door, coffee in hand, and dressed for work. He gave me a funny look and said he thought I was asleep since my truck was in the driveway. I told him where I'd been and asked why he was going into work at night. That's when he kind of laughed and asked if I was drunk. We stared at each other for a minute and then he told me it was just after 5 in the morning and he was going in just like he usually did. In my entire life, I'd never felt more confused than I did in that moment. I could tell he was dead serious, but I knew I had just left my friend's house. I checked my phone and sure enough, 5-something in the AM. My roommate left for work. I paced circles in the living room for a bit, then called the friend whose house I'd just left. He groggily answered and confirmed I'd left at 10 the previous evening. I have no idea what happened during those 7 hours of my life, and it gives me chills to think about it all these years later. I wasn't drunk, I wasn't tired, no one could have slipped anything in either of the 2 cause lights I'd had, no known medical conditions that would have caused me to black out, and nothing has happened like it since. I just don't know what happened to that time. I was walking to class from the dining hall on my campus when I saw a lady yelling for help and banging on a window of a nearby building. Lots of people were walking past, but I was the only one who seemed to acknowledge it. I went to the window to help and she told me she was locked in a room in the building and that she needed me to come in and open the door. Now, I have no idea the layout of this building and where she was located. So I decided to call campus security for help despite her pleading with me not to call them and to just let her out. I call them and when I hear them coming I go to greet them so I can take them to the window. I leave for maybe a maximum of 15 seconds and when I return with campus security she is gone. We can't see her at the window and campus security goes inside to double check and sure enough there is no trace of her. Campus security definitely thought I was crazy and I'm sure my professor thought I was full of shit when I explained to him why I was late. No one seems to believe me that this happened, but I swear it did. When I was around 9 or 10, this guy who looked about 40 just kept being in every single public place I was in. With my parents or not, he was there. At the store? Yes, he was there, bought everything me and my family bought. In school? Yes, he was staring at me on the other side of the school gate. Out in the city? Yes, following me in the streets. I told my parents so many times and they just ignored me and said I need to stop believing everything my brother says. Since my brother was really into creepy stuff at the time, he was 14, one day this guy just disappeared. The next thing I knew was that one of my friends kept seeing the guy everywhere. She many times pointed that the guy was outside the school gate watching her. I never saw him on the other side of the gate. Then she told me the guy disappeared after a few weeks. Then this other kid started telling everyone about the guy following him. About 7 months passed and I moved to another town. Still gives me creeps. Edit, for the people asking what he looked like, he was a ginger head, not really good looking, skeptical smiley face, and that's all I remember. Not quite sure how young I was at the time, but it was probably between 5 to 8. I was in my babysitter bed at the time in her trailer park. It was 3 a.m. I had woken up because I had to pee. When I woke up I looked down the hallway to see my babysitter leaning against the wall like one of the stereotypical cool guys do in movies. And I made eye contact and I felt my body go cold because she was still sound asleep next to me in bed. I went under the blankets trying to hide and when I looked back she was gone. I didn't want to sound crazy so I've never told anyone. I just sat in her bed watching infomercials until 6 a.m. when she woke up. Never even thought about sleeping there again. I honestly forget how much this affected me until I started writing this. Really freaked me out, man. Edit, since I never told anyone IDK if it belongs here, but no one in my family believes in ghosts, so if I were to tell them I guarantee it'd be dismissed. In the same room of my old house, I have seen a convulsed face floating outside my window. My brother has also seen it too. I saw the same face over a number of periods, and it would do stuff like smile and float closer and further from the glass. Our youngest brother a few years later complained that he didn't want to play with the boy in his room anymore as he was getting too much blood on his toys. It was the same room. I wrote about this a while ago. None of my family really believes me, everyone just dismissed me as imagining things. Copy and pasting below. So I was getting on the elevator in the metro. To get from the train platform to the main platform with the turnstiles and exit, you have to take the elevator. So I got on with this older guy, it was just us two. And I glanced over and this guy was watching me. Pointedly. And he was smiling, but not in a nice, welcoming way. You know, in cliché creepypastas where they talk about monsters with unnaturally wide smiles? That's exactly the kind of smile this guy had. Anyway, I looked away from him because I thought he was just crazy or something. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw him making these weird gestures all over his chest. It almost looked like he was making the sign of the cross or something. Finally, the elevator doors opened and we both got off and walked towards the turnstiles. I swiped my card to exit and then turned around to see if this dude was following me. And he was gone. There was nowhere else he could have gone. We were at the only exit for the station. Unless he turned back, ran and got on another elevator in about 4 seconds. I don't know. I don't know where the fuck he went. Anyway, I'm from a small town and sometimes weird things happen in the city that I don't quite understand, but I just chalk it up to me being practically a redneck. But this was really out there. And it's been bothering me. Anyway, there we go, that's all. Thanks for reading. I saw a panther-sized black cat darting out of a water retention, artificial forest near a school in the desert. Logically, it shouldn't be able to survive there, but holy shit, I saw it. Animal control wouldn't let that exist, there isn't really food enough for it, and the summers get dangerously hot if you've got black fur. Must have been 4 to 5 feet long. It doesn't make sense, but I 100% saw it, and so did the friend I was with. Not sure if it counts as creepy or overall scary, but it was weird. Back in high school I lived in a large apartment complex. It was maybe around 8 to 9 at night and completely dark. I was with a group of friends, 4 or 5 people. We were just talking and messing around with a friend's pair of walkie-talkies as we decided to look up in the sky as 2 fireballs, or what can be described as fireballs, just appear in the sky and slowly move in a line. Just as that happened, we started getting what sounded like military communication over said walkie-talkies that was really static, but words came in every now and then. About 10 or so minutes later the fireballs disappeared and the communication cut out. There was absolutely nothing about this on the news the next morning, and no one ever believed me. Footsteps and banging in my attic. For about 2 months, almost every night I would hear from my attic. The steps are only like 5 feet from my room, small taps or footsteps. Then it gradually got louder to the point it sounded like an audible foot was pressing on the wood. I told my dad and he told me it was probably an animal that got up there or something. Thing is, my sister heard it too, as her bedroom was in the same hallway as mine. My dad might have been right, as it was completely gone after 2 to 3 months, and right now at 2 a.m., I don't hear it. And I swear to God, if I hear it after I post this, I'm actually gonna piss my pants. When I was 3, we were picking up my grandparents for a Sunday drive. I was sitting in the back seat on the passenger side. My grandfather was sitting in front of me. Suddenly he keeled over, dead of a massive stroke. As they hustled my little sister and me out of the car and into my grandparents' store, I happened to look over my shoulder and plainly saw Grandpa walking down the street with 2 men. Both were dressed in suits, which made it all the more incongruous that Grandpa was wearing the same grey sweater and peaked hat he'd been wearing a moment before in the car. There was nothing particularly creepy about the experience, except that I wouldn't accept that Grandpa was dead because, after all, I'd just seen him walking down the street. Naturally, this didn't go over very well. But I loved my grandpa, I didn't want him to be dead, and I knew what I had seen. When our family doctor arrived to pronounce Grandpa dead, my mother asked me if I would take his word for it. We had a very good, trusting relationship with our doctor, so I said that I would. The doctor assured me that my grandfather had in fact died. But he was the only grown-up who didn't treat me like I was crazy. He listened respectfully as I told him what I had seen, and he suggested that maybe the men in the suits were angels. This seemed reasonable. Problem solved. But to this day I can still see Grandpa walking down the street with those two men. And no matter what my parents tried to tell me, it wasn't just a guy who looked like Grandpa coincidentally wearing exactly the same clothes he'd been wearing in the car. It was him. Thanks for watching. What would be your response? Leave it in the comments and see what the others say. Please also like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Until next time, take care.